on. Just give me a second. Gotta love this. All right. Sweet. Just want to make sure this is all working before I go. This is the first one, so haven't really done this much. Hopefully, get to do this more often and just like start a nice little community where like help each other. That is my ultimate goal. That is my goal in life. All right. I'm not sure if anyone can hear me very well. Um, okay. Hello, everyone. Let's get started. Today is the first of hopefully many animation critiques that we'll do here. My name is Jamal. I am the voice and mind behind Real Jam Animation, and will be hopefully making this basically a whole series that I do regularly, just critiquing your work, looking at some cool animations, and just giving some helpful tips. Um, so let's get started. The first thing I wanted to do, let's get my screen shared. So today I have two animations to check out. Um, the first one was actually a head turn. So if I get the screen showing, get started here. So this one here was from, geez, I forgot his name or their name. I had it written down. Let's see. It was from Optic Eye, one of my followers on one of the followers on TikTok. So let's check it out. Honestly, if I had time, I would have kind of cut it down a bit just because they wanted me to specifically check out one part of it, and there's are a few kind of like dark themes which I don't really want to get into today. Um, so let's see if I can turn the volume down. So I don't really want to get too heavily into that part of the animation. So let's just check out that part and kind of go over it a few times, just kind of see what we see off the top, and then we could go into how we could kind of fix those problems or those issues. From the jump, we have this character here. It's kind of like in this black space, and it's like this reverse black white drawing here, and it's just a turn that's about 4 frames over the course of, if this were 24 frames per second, over the course of roughly about 100 frames, which is fine. Um, it looks like it's a part of, if I were to go through this whole thing, it looks like it almost feels like an opening to a series or a show. So, style wise, that's great. Looks great. Um, this is definitely a great start. You have two main poses that you have on each side of the head turn or the turn altogether, and you have a breakdown in the middle, and then you have kind of like a skew as you ease into this last pose. I might change that up a bit. I'd suggest changing that up a bit to having actually four separately drawn images. And the best way to do that without it getting too complicated is to start with your key poses on each side of that head turn, and then to have like this ease into that last ease out of one act, ease out of one pose and into the next. What I usually do is I have my key poses on each side, and then I have two images in the middle, two poses in the middle, which are our breakdowns that favor one side versus the other. So just give you an example. I'll grab my pen here. So if I were to draw a timing chart, it would look something like this. So I got my first pose here. Let's just say my second pose is on frame 8, right? I'd have another pose that favors this side here, and another pose that favors the other side. So this would be my 2, oh, sorry, that'd be 3, 5, and this one would actually be, I don't remember what I was saying. This one would actually be 7, right? So this pose would be your main pose that is over here. So this is number 1. This pose would be your end pose, essentially, being 7. And then I'd have frame 3 and frame 2 favor each one of these poses. Um, and another thing I noticed while going through here was our line weight, especially on this middle one, the line weight gets much thicker. So it just doesn't feel consistent. So I'd probably go with a little bit more of a thinner line weight in general, mainly because you have more of a realistic characters. Usually line weights on, like, you know, it's like anime and stuff like that, they have really thin line weights, whereas you go into like Gumball or something really more Western, really cartoony, a thicker line weight, usually a thicker line weight. So yeah. So I'm gonna open up Animate here really quickly. Start a new scene. Let's click on something. Keep this second. All right. Slowing down. I have a lot of things running on my computer right now. All right. So we could use that timing chart as so that we could kind of understand it a little bit better. We could use that timing chart to actually help us animate a little bit easier. So if I move this out of the way here, bit of a so I'm just going to use very. So let's just say I turned this timing chart that looked like this into my drawing. So if I had a circle for the head, just for the sake of understanding this is the middle point here, I could, if this line here is my motion of like how the head or the ball is going to move from one place to the other, I'm basically translating this timing chart to here. So it looks very similar. Notice how, and that's how the timing chart actually relates to each other. So if this is like this, we go 1, let's call this 4 just for the sake of what we're doing here. So we understand, and it actually looks exactly like what we're seeing. That's how that translates. And then if I were to actually animate this, let's make another layer. Let's block this here. Let's get another color. I would have done it in a different color initially, but just helping you understand the timing chart. Because if we use this method here to kind of understand what we're doing first. All right. So my first key goes there, second key. Was relatively close. Just for the sake of making this easy for me, I don't have to like draw it out a bunch of times. Second key goes here. Our last key, which was over here, let's extend this 5. And then this key favors this one. Now, what that looks like here is, can't really see it, so let's slow this down quite a bit. Let's do like 5 frames at a time. And now we can use this to also do our turns. So the same how I use this as a cranial like mass to move it across to the other side of the screen, we can now use that as well on all the elements of our face. So let's start with the jaw. So if our first pose was here, let's come back to this. Let's just say it look like this. I'm gonna actually, for the sake of time, right? So my mass is here. Let's create a line here. Something around that nature, right? This now, oh wait, hold on. Made a bit of a mistake. Just a tiny one. Want it done on a different frame. Let's put that over here. All right. We could use this same timing chart here and translate it to different aspects of the face. So for example, we know that, let's unlock this again. If we know that our chin here, oh boy. All right. We know that our chin here starts right here and ends over here. And it's going through relatively the same arc. Not quite, but then we can use that timing chart to really play with our shapes here. So I want it to still favor this side. So quite honestly, I could do one of two things. I could, for the most part, because it's so close to the first position here, could go back to red. If that was the timing chart, it's supposed to be right here. Not exact, but I'll clean it up there. And this one is supposed to be similar to what we have here. If it's on the line here at the bottom of my chin. Now, that doesn't look the cleanest just yet. Once we start adding more facial features to this, it will play along a little better. We could actually move this over a little bit more as well to give it the sense that we are turning. Kind of messy. And obviously, like, if I wanted to, I could add another breakdown in between these ones here and clean up with the in-betweens. But I was just working off of those 3 poses here. And if you feel like that's too fast and that's not what you wanted, that's okay. Add more time, add more frames, um, and that'll still give you the same result. Um, so, for the sake of keeping this relatively simple, gonna add some eyes here. Now, I'm gonna a line here to keep. So, if the eye is in this position here, and I want to give it the sense that he's turning using the facial features on the face, the eyes are essentially kind of going to drift along the face a little bit, right? So it's still in the front. And again, we could go back to our timing chart here. That one. Right? If this is our eye, let's follow the bottom of the eye just because it's easy. It's gonna end up over here because that's where the other eye is gonna be roughly. Right? Follow the same logic. That means eye is gonna end up relatively here. Notice so it's close to the face here. It's slowly farther away from that center point. And quite honestly, you'd probably have your nose here, whatever. Just haven't drawn the nose yet. But in theory, your nose would be here, probably covering that eye, but that other eye would start coming into view. But it still more visually looks like this pose here. And then same thing with here. Let's get our eye in here. Let's just say that. Right. This one here. It's on the line here. It's relatively close. I mean, using your judgment. That looks crazy only because it's a little bit slanted, so let's make sure that we fix that. And because this is a bit of a easing in terms of time, let's actually make this a little bit further so it's not so evenly spaced. To do the same thing on the opposite side. maybe a little too far. I'm also got to give myself a time limit on how much I'm gonna do on these, mainly just because of time purposes. I don't want this to go on too long. So I'll give it about 9 more minutes max. And obviously, if you ever feel like, also one thing you'll notice that I actually gave this quite a bit of an arc. I imagine on yours you don't want it to be that deep. Um, that could always be, you don't have to go that deep. That just had to be the first arc that I did. I didn't really think about that as much. In theory, what I probably would have went with for yours specifically, you do want a bit of an arc because if you want to think of the body as a whole thing, it's not just the head, but like imagine if I was stepping from here and then I was turning this way. I'm most likely lifting one of my legs and kind of like turning to look in whatever different direction. Especially in your animation, he was actually physically turning. So naturally, it's to the drop is lifting your foot for the weight shift and or lifting your weight for the weight shift and turning. You're not like lifting it super high or anything, but just enough to get a bit of a drop. So the arc might look a little bit more loose. Like it might be not loose, sorry, a little bit more shallow. So instead of something like this, it might be as little as that, which isn't large in contrast, but the difference will make a difference, especially if you're doing really subtle things in animation. So because you're doing that from the core, it's gonna translate in basically every other part of your body, from like the hips upwards, right? So if my hips are going up and down, my head's going up down. There's not much I can do about it. There might be a little bit of a delay in terms of like how when that happens, but that motion is still going to carry on to the other parts of my body. Right. Anywho, so for example, if I were to continue this, right? So our head just continues on into the rest of our body. You have our shoulders, right? I would really loose sketch, but our arms are in there. Whatever. I would take this same arc and use that to move my character around. Um, Now, I might lead with the body or I lead with the head, depending on how I want that to look. So if I'm looking like this, if I'm going, I might look with my head, and once my neck is kind of like started moving, my body will kind of follow along. It's a nice way to do it. It could also be like, but just play with it depending on what you want that action to feel like. Really, it's really what that comes down to. What do you want? What is your goals in terms of portraying your animation for your audience? What do you want them to feel? What is your character thinking? There's so much that goes into it, and if you actively get up and act these things out with these thoughts in mind, not necessarily what the viewer wants to see, that's important, but actually like think of what the character's thinking. Why are they turning? Did they hear something? Like if they did, they're going to try to look at that thing right away as fast as possible. And your head is a small thing on your big body, so it moves a lot faster than your body does. In fact, your eyes move even faster. So your eyes will move first, your head will move second, your body will move last. However, if it's like something like I'm pulling something, I might I might pull with my body, and then like the head kind of comes after, or there's so many different things. And it's really just like act it out in real life. Actually try it and like feel your body and see what, and kind of like take note of what your body's doing as you're doing these things, um, as well as recording yourself and actually visually seeing it is a whole other thing. Just getting as much references for your animation as possible, whether it be live recordings um, or just like feeling it and doing it, and then taking that as reference of the action. For example, in most of the shorts that I do for the animation, when the character's talking, what I'll do a couple of times is I will sit there and go, "Oh, he's saying this. Um, oh, he oh, we need to look that way. Ooh, need to look that way." And I'll notice that naturally without even thinking about it. I've shaken my head a couple times. It's like, okay, I need to add that to my animation. Ooh, and I also dipped a little bit. My shoulders went up. There's a lot of things that, and you do it over and over again until you like really take in all the little small intricacies that you do without like fully realizing it. Benefit of uh, animating it, sorry, benefit of recording doing that is that you actually get to you get to see what you're doing. So I've become very aware because I do it a lot of all my little things that I'm doing and what to kind of like feel and look for when I'm acting it out. But when you're beginning, there's a lot of things that you don't notice. Um, and it really comes down to just like practicing that. So the more you do it, the more you'll notice what you need to check out. Is your shoulder, how much your shoulders go up? Do they slouch? Did your whole body drop? Do you tilt your head? Does it like follow behind? There's a whole lot of small little things to look out for. But also, if you record it, then you could just do it once. You could do it once, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, 9 times, whatever. But then you could look at it for hundreds, 300s. You could use it as reference for another animation later. There's so many small things that you could actually like zoom in on and like, that is working there and why it's working like that. And you could actively analyze it with your eyes versus just like going based on a feeling. Another great way is using a mirror. You can do that as well. The only difference between a mirror and recording it is that if you record it, you can play it back. A mirror, it's you see it with your eyes. That's all you got. Also, if you're trying to act it out without like looking at what you're looking at, like for example, if I'm trying to figure out how my feet are working, but I want like the full action, I'm going to be looking down instead of looking up or doing anything up here that I want to see. Anywho, moving on. I'm going to move on to the next one only because we are like a half hour in, and I've only done one critique, and I wanted to get through two of these today. So we're going to move on to the next one. I'll do a quick run through of what I thought about your animation earlier. So line weights, I'd probably try my best to keep those consistent. Um, Favoring your key poses to do your turnarounds. So right now you have it. What your timing looks like, I actually didn't write that. What your timing currently looks like is one, two, and then you've just kind of like skewed this last one to give it that final ease motion, which can work at times. If you are going to get that to work, you still want the head to look like it's moving in a direction instead of like it looks like if I were to like go back over it, it looks like it's pivoting from like right here where if you want to kind of like pivot from the bottom down here so that the upper half of the head actually still feels like it's moving forward if you're going to go that route. Also, one thing I didn't say in this turn, remember we're moving our body, so we generally don't turn like in this like perfect like if I was on an axis point right through my body like it's more or less there'll be a little bit of a movement, and you'll notice like if you look at the camera, my head was when I was turned sideways profile to you and I came straight, it moved over just a little bit, ever so slightly. It's not a lot, but it's enough to say that I'm translating and moving my body over. You want that to kind of be within your animation as well. So yeah, we want a little bit of a movement sideways with the turn. our line weights. What other notes did I have? Um, and then the timing. Just having your in betweens favor one side versus another. It makes your animation a lot more interesting. It's actually easier to do because when you're trying to figure out what's in the middle of everything, it's what you're ending up doing is you're almost redrawing just about everything. This is a whole different angle altogether. This is a 3/4 front angle. This is a profile, and this is a front angle. Those are three full different angles. They do work for a turnaround, whereas a profile with a slight variation will give you the sense of a head turn. And same with the front. I'll actually, before I move on, I'm going to do this really quickly. I'm going to open up, um, honestly, it doesn't really matter which one. Not sure if I'm opening anything up. I don't know what I just opened. We'll find out in a second. All right. So this is our friend here. It's probably a full scene. I'm not going to get into what scene it is specifically, or but in terms of getting this from one place to another, this uses symbols. It's not like hand drawn or anything. Um, so it's a little bit easier in that sense. But let's make this easy to work with. So I'm going to make this how I usually get head turns to work. You could do this in drawing as well. It's same concepts at the end of the day. It's just slightly different. I do use a lot of cheats when it comes to animating this character a bit. Um, so I'll do my best to I do visual cheats. So for example, if I'm rotating around the head, in theory, this should go behind the head at a certain point. I usually don't break that just for ease of animating, and I'll just start sliding the head down. I'll start rotating things, but not gonna get into that right now. I just want to show you kind of visually how that turns out very quickly. Um, so I usually do this a little bit different. His mouth usually goes over off to the side, but for the sake of time, I am not going to do that right now. And his hair, something like this, and his ears would be back here. I hate it. I can't not do it. I hate it so much. Um, let's set this to profile. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's not what it was before, and I just couldn't. I really did not like it. All right, and this needs to go. Oh man, I messed up just a little bit. And just because I already did that there, so it's got a sad face. Let's go with that. Wrong frame. Let's move it over one more frame. Same with you. Okay, you're good. So looks like head turn. It's great. Kind of like what you had with your profile and moving over. few things, like I said. I'm only doing the head right now. I could do the whole body, but the head moves over a little bit, right? So we got that first pose, that second pose, that first pose. So to break this down, kind of like how we had in our thing, we had the character moving over a bit, coming down a bit, and then we could start translating the elements on the face to make it look like we are rotating a bit. Now I usually do this a little bit different, only because time constraints and follows. Let's get the head base here. Need that ear kind of moving. It's not much, but it's actually like you can kind of see the bit of its horn over there. It was kind of breaking my. I might have did it a little bit too far. There we go. Those like elements are rotating around the body or on the head. I'm gonna take this head, gonna copy over here because I want to animate it based on what that head looks like. And I want to animate it going back to where it was before. So I'm going to select everything else. A little bit of movement here. Hair. And for parallax, I usually do this back hair a little bit less, just to give it that sense of rotating a bit. I could even do that here. Let's extend these a bit farther away from each other. Main pose. Then comes closer. You'll notice that maybe favor just a little bit less. And back here, just like pushing it. Let's loop that in this area here so you can kind of see it. And you'll notice that my breakdowns are basically very similar to my key poses, which are key pose, and this one's a key pose. Then my breakdowns are very similar to those other ones. And basically they're working as my ease. So if I were to do in-betweens and stuff, I'll use tweening just for time's sake here. So these two are like very similar and they're gonna just like flip over between the two. Let's do that like that. Nah. If I were to add a tween here, what that looks like. Let's ease it nicer so that it actually looks proper. I like to start with a quad and end with a cubing. Right? Now, obviously, that's a pretty big jump in between, so it might be beneficial for me to add an extra breakdown in here that's a little bit more outward more. Like this one might be favoring this a little bit, maybe not enough. And there was an aspect of this kind of like squishing as it was moving over. I'm usually like very careful on like, oh, this moved like exactly 5 ticks this way. So, but for the sake of time, because I did say I wanted to move on to the next one like 10 minutes ago. Right? Um, and all that is these three poses are just broken down. Spread that back out like this. Right? And now I'd add other angles that I usually animate on. But for the sake of simplicity, that's usually how I go about doing that. It's movement with a little bit of movement of the head of like translating it. And then the elements of the face are being translated as well to make it feel like it's rotating around the ball that is the head. Now, obviously, our heads aren't actually balls. We have different other shapes and forms, but it's like we have the ball shape at the top, and then we have that triangle-ish shape at the bottom, um, and that would be rotating around, and our eyes are just rotating around that shape. So if the elements of the face, if you keep them moving properly, you want to have them kind of shifting across as you do in that turn. Anywho, moving on. Our second animation that we're working on here, that we're looking at here, was this one here, and this one is from Grim Gears. Grim Gears followed me on TikTok. Yes, I could see you. How's it going? Thanks, Cake. Appreciate it. Um, I am currently just doing a little bit of critiques here. I got this one in 3D here. As you know, I am a 2D and 3D animator, so I was actually going to critique this one, and actually go over how to create it as well. I have Maya open here. Not sure if you use Maya specifically to make this, but I have another character. Um, he has arms, but we're not going to worry about that. I'll keep his arms to the side or something. I don't know. Right. So we'll start playing this. This one is pretty straightforward. It's a classic exercise of a character standing up. Let's play it here. Cool. Some things I noticed just right off the bat. Um, a few like really small logistic things first. The feet don't touch the ground, which isn't a huge deal. You could do one or two things. You could have the character come lower, or you could have the ground up higher. Um, it's a small issue, a bit of a pet peeve, but it's not that big of a deal. Um, Another thing is I'd probably start with a much more natural pose at the beginning here, because generally speaking, we don't sit like this. Kind of uncomfortable. So what I would suggest is starting with like, I know you kind of want to go with like this whole reverse when you're like doing like poses, kind of like a reverse from the opposite to kind of give that nice sense of change. But that could be as little as you could still have that curve here, but just have it like sitting upright or something. Like that feels so much more natural than this crazy lean back. And then you still are able from this position, you still have quite a bit of translation from there to here, which is right. Um, and then the end pose, it's okay. He's kind of leaning. Like if you were to do a line upwards where he is, kind of leaning forward, he's still within like his box here, so it's fine. It still works. I wouldn't worry too much about that pose. It's just a relatively simple exercise. Um, and then the other thing I noticed like very quickly is that he feels like he's doing like this thing where he's like, he's going, uh, right? realistically, unless you want your character to feel that way, you really only need to come up and, if anything, have one overshoot if you want that. Personally, I'd probably just go straight into an east for such a slow action, unless you want the character to kind of like feel tired. Like they have very little tired or drunk. They just have like little control of their body. Um, so there's that. Um, and let's take this over here. Also, another thing is that the timing kind of feels a little off. So he kind of comes up, slows down in like this middle position, which I'm assuming you had like a pose there, and it's just easing out of that pose. We want that to feel like one full action versus like our lean forward is an action and then straight up to the action. Versus you have like the sit position, you have like this come forward position, you have this back position, and then like a little like, you know what it reminds me of this back and forth actually. You know the thing behind behind the door that kind of like stops. And you have the same board goes. That's this motion here. It's just there's so much of it. So when you're doing the lean forward has like two main purposes. It's because when you're sitting here, you're using the box. You have your base. Oh, I can't remember what it's called, but the base of where your center of gravity is. To stay balanced, your base needs to be within this box. And because you have the box here, that base goes all the way out to the back of the box, like you're sitting on it. That's why this character feels centered. You lean forward because once you're getting off the box, you need to be balanced on your feet. You need balance on both ends to be able to lift yourself up. So that is great that you have that there. Um, this right here would be an issue only because if this is your box, because nothing else, you're not touching the box anymore, it doesn't extend past there, you'd fall over. You'd absolutely fall over. So you don't want to lean too far forward. You still want to like have a bit of a lean, but just enough to get you up. It's that lean is used as momentum and balance. So you're using that rock, so it's like some. That's why you'll see like as you get older. Um, I'm in my 30s now. As you get older, you'll notice that people like rock backwards before they get up, and that's just so that they have momentum to lift themselves upwards. So that lean forward is a bit of balance and a bit of that getting up aspect. Um, so yeah, let's just jump right into this Maya file here. Let's switch cameras here. There we go. So I've got this character here. I haven't set up the box. I wanted to have some of these things set up for this video, for this live recording, which seems as good. I only have about 10 more minutes. We'll see how fast I can do this. I wanted it to be about an hour, but we could extend it if I have to. I ain't got nothing to do. Yeah. Let's create. I haven't been in Maya in a while. I've been working in 2D for so long. Um, Believe it or not, I started out as a 3D animator. I went to school for 3D animation and everything. And then after, I think it's like my second or third job, one of my college professors was working on a movie, a film, and they were doing it in 2D. It's like, yeah, I can bring you on, but you have to be able to do the 2D. Fortunately, I wasn't well versed in it. I am now, obviously, um, and I basically just had to learn on the job. My first like three jobs are like that, and quite honestly, coming out of school, they prepare you and teach you how to do things, and they give you all the knowledge you need to learn. But a lot of the learning comes on the job. Yeah, my first job was doing motion capture. I had never even been inside a motion capture studio up to that point. Um, but I did it, and it's something I've done working on a game. Yeah. Anyway, back to this getting distracted. So let's start by creating this box. Uh, like I said, I'm going to try my best to do this as fast as possible. I feel like if I had still remember some of the shortcuts. Believe it or not, I was also all right. I'm so used to using Flash that my mental shortcuts are kind of failing me right now. Let's snap this down here just for the sake of creating a box that looks like in yours was relatively knee height. And that's the height of like most chairs. It's kind of at that level for most adults at least. Um, Short people exist. All right. So I got my box. I am going to. Usually I wouldn't key polygons, but I'm not worrying about it right now. I'm keying it just so that I don't kind of mess anything up on it. I am also going to set a key on all my controllers here. Caps lock is on. Weird habits I picked up over time. All right. So I'm going to start with my sitting pose and my ground. Best practices is actually create a ground plane. So I'm going to create the ground, and I'm going to select my box as well because I actually don't want to move these by accident. So let's create. Uh, cool. Where are you? There you are. I've got a reference there, so I can't select it by accident and move it around, and that way it's not in my way either. All right. So we got a ground. Um, oh man, going back and forth between Animate and Maya. I'm actually looking at my screen over here. I have multiple screens. I use them for different things. I generally don't use a drawing tablet for Maya, so that's why I do it on a separate screen. Okay, this is an IK. Man, I have to remember how to do this. I haven't used this rig in a while, so bear with me a little bit here. Just want to set them up. Set them up for success. All right. Hip isolation, FKI head, spine, FKIK. Perfect. That's what I want. I just like an FK spine. Something about an IK spine that just like weirds me out. Like spines don't work that way. Like you don't move your body from like other parts. You can. It's just anywho, doesn't matter. So wait, if I'm going back, I'm looking back between these two scenes. So if I show you, so here we want to start with this first pose that we got here, and I am add the arms in this, but yours didn't have arms, so I want to actually kind of I want to hide it, but I feel like that gets really complicated very quickly. Let's undo some of this. I'm going to semi-break this rig just because I can. We are going to hide a lot of this just so that the arms exist, you just can't see them. Can I hide these as well? No, they don't make it hidden. Can't hide this. So arms don't exist. That's all that matters. Okay, so we got our body here. If I wanted to get it in a slightly more, in a slightly more natural position, I might like curve the body up like this, give him a little bit of a slouch. Right? So we got our first pose here. Looks great, looks good. Let's try that one more time. It's great. Set that key. Let's turn this timeline down because it's crazy high. Let's go 25 frames. I couldn't imagine standing up being more than like 2 seconds. I'm at 24 frames per second. Perfect. Let's go 10 frames ahead. Our next pose outside of that would be the lean forward and up. So I'm going to have him lean forward, kind of slouch backwards when I did that. And this was to get us to that position here. Right. Remember, we want to get in a position where our body is over our center here. So we got a pose here, we lean forward, and we stand up. I should have kept that standing pose just because of ease. Where is it? Here we go. But also the default pose is also not the most appealing most of the time. So having it kind of change a little bit is not a bad thing. Adobe Animate's kicking me right now. What that looks like here. Right. So I've got all these poses here that I got all these poses here that I can now work with. Let's delete that key because I made that mistake there. What is going on? Ugh. Computer's freezing up. I've got like 20 things here. Let's close this because I don't actually need this open anymore. Close my animate file. No, I do not want to save my weird head drawing. All right. Okay, so we got these poses here. Perfect. Like I said, kind of running out of time, so I'm just going to speed run this a little bit here. So we got our poses here. You'll notice that this, between this here, his butt's still on the chair, and coming up is all one motion. And now the general movement is pretty much already done with just those three poses. If you wanted to really spice it up, add some drag into it. So because the action's being pushed from the cog, the center right here, our hips, the drag would be on the other parts of the body. So I could add some drag there just to pump this up a bit. Let's curve it down during this part. Same with the head. And then instead of like going back and forth, I want to just ease into that pose. It's not that drastic of an action. Now, if you're going really fast up, maybe that makes a little bit more sense. But for that specifically, not so much. So I'm going to take that key here that was at the 20, and I'm just going to delay it by a few frames. So drags behind, and you reach your end pose a little bit later. It might be a little bit too, instead of 20, it's going to go 2 frames, a little bit longer. And then the head drags behind even longer than that. So we'll select the head and pull that maybe another 2 frames. And you'll notice that you have a little bit more of a natural get up versus versus like having a lot of this back and forth. And now, let's just say, for argument's sake, you really wanted that pullback a little bit here. What I would do is I'm going to take all these keys here because I'm going to add the overshoot because it's gonna end up in this little area here. If I were to come into here, the chest here, happens on this frame. Come back a little bit more. You have to make sure that our hips are also being affected by this a bit. So it's a little bit back. Not a lot, just a little bit because we don't want to go off balance. So it comes back. Same with the head. And then they're all coming back to this one spot, but just like how I did before, I have a little bit of a delay on all of it. So this torso piece, maybe 2 frames. Same with the head, another 2 frames. And then now I'm doing this really fast, like I said. If I were to really like go into it, I feel like the head should drag a little bit more here. Let's pull it down. All right. I feel like it hits that like up position really pretty hard. And then this is where it gets into like animation editor. So if I get my graph editor here, let's pull that back up. If I turn this into my graph editor, there we go. Like I said, it's been a while for me, guys. Just give me a second. Remembering where everything is. Graph editor, graph editor. I know you're right here. There you are. So this translate Y, which is my up and down, feels like it's hitting really hard, and it is. Look, it's just coming up and like hitting right at the top here. I might just add a bit of an overshoot on that just so that doesn't feel as harsh. Unless if I break the tangents here, I could make this a little longer. Break tangents. I don't need to break tangents. I need to like make it free. Have it. Things I don't remember. It's okay. I'll just do it differently. One thing animation has taught me is that there's 100 ways to do just about anything. I should say animation software has taught me. Let's tone that down a bit. And that should soften that a bit. Now, this might be all a little fast because I feel like it comes up to here and kind of like just speeds up into this. So what I'll do is this upper half of the body. No, I'm not gonna select that. Just the upper half of the body. Is it the whole body? Is it just yeah? All right. So this area here, you get to select these keys. I'm gonna move it down a little bit more. I'm gonna select all of these keys, and I'm actually gonna scale it out so it's a little bit more over time. Like I said, I personally not a fan of the overshoot and settle, but um, gives you a little bit more of